Hey, everybody. Welcome back. It's been a couple of weeks, but we are back with another GM's podcast. This is the Vikings, and I am joined by um, a, an owner who enjoys actually talking about his team, enjoys actually prioritizing this league over new houses. Although, RJ, do you have a new house at this point, or is that just Chris?
No new house. My attention is solely on fantasy football right now.
As it should be. I mean, there should be no other priorities beyond that. So I'm glad at least you have your heart in the right place. Um, so what we wanted to do tonight is when Chris and I were on the pod last time, it was kind of introducing some of the new owners to the league and introducing some of the new rules to the league as well. Wanted to kind of take the next step on that and start looking at some of the trading. What do we like about trading? What do we not like about trading? Advice we have of kind of our favorite and least favorite trades, and just advice to new owners of as you get used to a league like this versus classical dynasty leagues, what makes sense for you to keep in mind that you might not have before. So we have 13 trades that have taken place since January 7th. Apparently, all of you got the bug earlier this week because I think most of them have been done in the last 3 days. Um, but what we'll do is we'll kind of take a look at those from each owner's perspective. Are they a building owner? Are they a competing owner? What is the salary cap impact of those things? Trade compensation, things like that, just to kind of help expand the mindset of the folks who have been in the league for a couple of years, open that up to some of the folks who may have just joined, and hopefully this is useful for everybody involved. So whether that just be this year, multiple years, whatever. Our hope is that it's kind of almost evergreen in terms of its applicability. All right, RJ, you ready to jump into it?
Sure, let's go.
Cool. All right. So first and foremost, we had a guy who was coming into the year pretty much just idolized as one of the top three tight ends. Um, you wanted this guy. If you couldn't get him, Kittle, or Kelsey, you were missing out, or you should wait as long as possible. But here he is being traded for Tyler Eifert, Kale Warren, and a third, and he has a fourth going along with him. I know Ertz is, I think Ertz is a free agent this year. And he's 30, which again, I know as soon as you have a three at the start of your age, you are verboten in most dynasty leagues. But this seemed like a good buy low by the Ravens, or maybe it was a good sell high by the Giants. What were your thoughts on this one?
Um, I, if I had to say it would be somewhat of a sell low for the Giants. This is kind of a weird one. Ertz is on the, I don't want to say tail end of his career. Tight ends do historically have a little bit longer of a career, at least playing in closer to their mid 30s than a lot of other positions. Ertz is, I believe he is a free agent. No, hold on. I'm trying to find his contract right now.
Good thing for me to pull up as well, just to make sure I'm not completely talking out of the left side of my ass.
He is an $8 million cap hit for 2021. Oh, 12 million total.
Okay, so there is a potential savings by cutting him, but again, 4 million may not be enough to actually move the needle for the Eagles unless they're really trying to start the tank process this year. And again, I don't think they would have fired Roseman and hired a new guy if they wanted to do that. So I think he's probably going to be around. So he's probably in Philly this year, and then hitting free agency in the future for the twilight of his career.
Yeah.
So if we look at his contract when he got moved, 4-year, $14 million contract that got moved. In response, the Giants got a 9-year, $2 year, $9 million contract effort, and Kale Warren, 3-year, $819,000 contract. So I guess this is again kind of a bet that the combination of these two tight ends and a 1 round bump is going to make up for the production that Ertz can give you when he's on his game, or that Ertz may not be on his game for the foreseeable future.
Well, I think some of the picks, or some of the trades, I mean, with more flashy names that we will talk about through all this. This one kind of fits in that category. Are great ones to discuss because it kind of does allow you to understand alternative thinking, like for the players and their value, rather than just what the particular player is. So when we break it all down, like you have Zach Ertz with one guaranteed year of potential production as it sits right now, at a somewhat bloated financial contract in our league, with an amount of years attached to a 30-year-old player that you just don't want. So there are a lot of things that like ding his value away from being that like high end, like premium tight end. Of course, his production's still going to be there, but the other baggage that you're bringing along with it makes him less desirable. So when you break it down like that and you look at the compensation, it doesn't seem as ridiculous.
Right. And I think one of the important things to think about for this year, too, is that's a $14 million tight end right now. We're likely going to have a flat cap between our 2020 league and 2021 league, just based off of the fact of a decreasing cap in the NFL. So, with that in mind, it makes sense to be smart with your dollars on turnover, but at the same time, buy low on 1 year productive players that you can get, with the hope that next year is going to start to see things jump in the other direction. So again, I don't think any part of this trade is unfair. I think this is a good deal for both sides. I think Ravens adds another player who is probably on the low side of his value, but in terms of selling Zach Ertz, I don't know if you're going to get much better in a league like this than this right now, because Goddard looks poised to jump him. And are you really going to pay up a couple of potential starters and a 3rd-rounder for a tight end too on his own team? So wide range of outcomes. I think you kind of hit this on the head. His upside is probably still, top 10 tight end. His downside is probably closer to the mid-20s. And I think that wide range of risk allows for a lot of deals to be made.
Yep. I like this trade for the Zach Ertz side inside the first calendar year of how this pans out. After that, I like the Giant side of it.
I love breaking news. We just post the title of this podcast as trade season, and we have a new Seahawks owner who I don't think we got to welcome last time. So Dominic, welcome to the league. Looks like you're taking on the Seahawks, and good on you, because we're looking for some positive ownership from that team, and it looks like he's made a trade here. So I haven't seen what the trade is yet, but he just sent a note to Bengals and Jeremy to get that process. So hopefully in the next trade or two that we discuss, we may have a new one to discuss.
Nice.
Breaking. So moving on to the next deal we have that's been processed. I think 12 is what I have. We have Christian Blake, Ryan Izzo, Raekwon McMillan, and a 4th and a 5th for the Texans' 4th. So if I remember correctly, the Cardinals are a non-playoff team. So I think they were the 7th pick in each round. So, and the Texans made the playoffs. That said, this looks like a complete cap dump. McMillan was $3.7 million. Izzo looks to be a free agent at this point. And Blake, $1 million. So a 4th and a 5th with $5 million in contract for a later fourth. Again, looks like a contract dump.
Yep.
I'm surprised though because again, Raekwon was on my team at some point last year, so I will caveat whatever I say with that. It seemed like it was almost premature, and frankly, the difference between cutting them and keeping these picks and having a $2.5 million cap hit versus not having that cap hit and moving down in the fourth seems almost negligible. But at the same time, like we're talking about moving down in the fourth and getting an extra $5 million in cap. Like I can't fault him for it. I don't think I would have done it, but I can't fault him for it.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I see nothing wrong with it. I would have handled it slightly different. I probably would have just cut all 3 players and kept the picks. Especially cut them before the rollover, so it doesn't greatly impact your cap hit for the next year, 2 years, whatever amount it is. But yeah, I see nothing wrong with it. I can't complain or say it's some ridiculous deal. It's just not what I would have done. But I might get into that mindset at some point where I might need to dump something of that nature.
Yeah, and I mean for teams that were rebuilding, and I'm gonna teams can go back a couple of years and see the shit I was doing 2 or 3 years ago to try and rebuild my team. It was if you had a bad contract you wanted to get rid of, I was your Huckleberry. So I was taking Kevin White for on a $14 million contract to dump for a third rounder or things like that. So there's always going to be somebody who's willing to take bad contracts in this league because that's just the nature of the league. We're not an NFL team. We don't have to sell tickets to a stadium. We are willing to completely blow it up and rebuild in spectacular fashion. That said, again, it's about doing it for the right price, especially in a flat cap year. I feel like the Bucks probably could have charged more, but I can't hate this deal. All right, moving on. Here's actually a really fun one. The 11th of the 13 trades that we had to talk about here is Cooper Kupp for a 2021 first and a 2021 second from the Chargers. So the first is from the Packers, who I want to say is in the teens. I want to say around the 13th pick. And the Chargers, of course, was a championship team, so that's going to be very late second.
I believe they're 11. Yeah, okay. They're 11.
So 111 and a late second for Cooper Kupp on a $9 million contract. Again, I think the extension was before the trade. A $9 million contract for 5 more years. So this is another one of those situations where rounds matter a whole lot for some of these players. Kupp was able to get extended for 4 more years last year and do it at a much cheaper price because of, I think, him being a second-round pick in his draft year, which, of course, allows you to renegotiate.
I believe he was a startup purchase, but he was actually extremely low in the startup. I want to say he was somewhere in the $2 or $3 million range.
Let me see here. So go ahead and go to full player page.
2017 rookies should have been our startup. So like Corey Davis.
Yeah, he was won an auction for $7 million. So he was won in the startup for $7 million, traded quite a few times.
Oh, you said 7? Whoa.
7.
Okay. I thought the hype came really late in the preseason in his rookie year. So
well, if I remember, so this was May 9th. So there was a Senior Bowl, and there was a good bit of hype from that.
Oh, that's fair.
But still, because he was an original startup, he was not restricted by some of the cap items around draft picks, but rather could be just straight up renegotiated or extended.
Yep.
So, again, players like that, Again, I've got Kenny Galladay, who has that kind of exemption at a less than $3 million price, is a great advantage. But at the same time, something that is disappearing in the league is those players start to age out. So this is where we go from startup to an actual sustainable team policy. But again, having him on a less than $10 million contract for a player who scored 220 points last year is not bad. I mean, 11, I feel like I would prefer the rookie there to Cup. But again, that's also because I often diagnose with rookie fever.
So my own personal opinion would probably want the picks. But for a team that has any interest in contending, especially a team in the NFC North where, it becomes a shootout late in the season, I like the idea of picking up Cup. I feel like it's roughly market value. Those sub $10 million price controlled wide receivers, and yeah, I guess it's only wide receivers at this point, but the price controlled wide receivers from the startup that are under $10 million are a huge asset. They are aging, but wide receivers will last a little bit longer than the running backs. So this is where you'll see like Cooper Cup getting a first round, and then somebody that was ridiculously cheap in the startup, like a Kenyon Drake, be sold for drastically less than what he was last year, because of the longevity in the wide receiver position. So I think the wide receivers that are in that category still can command a premium and should command a premium like that. I don't see many other wide receivers that I'd pay a top 11 pick for.
So, as mentioned, we have a trade to discuss live on here. It just got approved.
Okay.
The Seahawks and Bears, two new owners, deals with each other. The Seahawks giving Kareem Hunt and a fourth this year for Calais Campbell, Robert Spillane, and the Jaguars 2021 first. So for folks who don't have the same memory or maybe obsession listening as we do, this is, I think, the third running back that this pick has gotten traded for.
Yeah.
So initially, the Jags pick got sent to the Bears for Derrick Henry. And then I think the pick got traded back
to me for Devin Singletary.
And then you traded it back for Raheem Mostert.
Right.
And now it's gotten traded for Kareem Hunt. So 4 running backs who have moved for this pick. And if I remember correctly, this is around like 15 or 16, right?
I want to say it's 20. The Jags won a couple of games towards the end of the season.
Yeah, no, they were definitely in the mix of this thing the entire time. So
it is 16.
16. So middle of the first round. I mean, that's going to be pretty hot for some of the top IDP guys, or some of the later offensive guys. Kind of end of the first round value in terms of your normal league. So I like the deal. I think it makes a lot of sense. Kareem Hunt is definitely a value since he's already been extended. $8 million running back who scored over 200 points last year. I think that's going to be better than you get from a production standpoint at that point. Calais Campbell is one of those guys who was a consistent performer, had the 37-point week in week 6, but otherwise was kind of a disappointment this year. Just kind of racking up 2 or 3 point weeks, but again, as part of a goose machine, made sense. I think I really like this deal for both teams. Seahawks adds another pick, and Seahawks adds a running back for a decent price. I think this is good.
Seahawks give up the running back.
Yeah, Seahawks give up the running back
to
the Bears, and the Seahawks add the 16th pick.
I
So
like it. I like it for the Bears. I don't like the compensation for the Seahawks. I feel like Kareem Hunt uh, commands a little bit more than that. I know, like I did just say some of those like priced in aging running backs are
mhm.
kind of dropping in value, but he's the youngest out of all of them. He's gonna be 26. Like he's just gonna be 26, just turning 26 when the season starts. Where a vast majority of his peers in that draft class will be turning 28, 27, 28.
Yeah, and again, from that draft class, I would agree. He's on the younger side. I think you want on the other side of 20 for most of your guys, and Hunt is unfortunately with Nick Chubb right now. So I agree. I think from a pure production standpoint, Hunt probably warrants more, but I think due to his situation
I
and
I
the
may
price
be
tag,
a
I think this is fair.
I may be assessing it slightly differently. I see essentially no value in Calais Campbell. I expect him to retire
Yep.
this year. He's 35. Spillane is a literal nobody that got
He's an
uh
expiring contract.
well, he only got run because Bush got hurt. And he's gonna go back to being like the fourth man on the depth chart. Like wherever he goes, if he stays with Pittsburgh, he's not he's not
That's
gonna
what I
go
mean. He's on a 1 year deal. He is an expiring contract thrown in here to make the numbers work.
right. So essentially, is Kareem Hunt worth the 16 pick? Or is Kareem Hunt in a fourth worth the 16 pick? And I'd probably want a little bit higher than the 16th pick. I think that Green Bay pick would have been right in line for Kareem Hunt, but maybe not necessarily the Jags pick.
Yeah, I mean, look, would I have liked a little bit higher? Of course.
Yeah,
If I start to if I start to lay out who the receivers and who the players are for this pick, you're probably looking at the second or third IDP, and like I said, into first round value for offensive players, especially in a league like ours. I think the quarterbacks are going to be top loaded, so you're going to see those four go pretty early. You've got your 2 to 3 running backs based off of who you follow, and I think there's a deeper receiver pool. So and plus Pitts. So again, I don't. I agree. I think I would rather see this around the 12 range, but I'm not
it
going to go by the 16th.
right. It's splitting hairs essentially.
Yeah,
Which I guess in that sense I don't hate it. Like I don't look at it and have some like awful reaction. It
of course.
takes me like looking at it and assessing it to actually like give that opinion. So on face value, it's perfectly fine.
And the other aspect is, I mean, Seahawks have CEH, so hopefully, and a need in this league to only start one at running back. Obviously, you want a little bit more depth, but I would say Hunt is a person who doesn't fit his window, so should be expendable.
I,
Um,
Actually, when you start to look at like team build and having Chase Edmonds on that amazing deal, yeah, I'd probably sell very slightly low on Kareem Hunt just to like make other roster moves and have a little bit more liquidatable assets.
yeah, again, I think this makes some good sense. I think hopefully Seahawks are in a position to get a quarterback this year, and they can start making some noise in the West. All right, moving back to what we were talking about earlier. So let's see. We went through the Cup trade, so let's go to a pick consolidation trade. The Colts giving up the Panthers fourth, the Colts fifth, Steelers fifth, Lions fifth, and Jets fifth for the Titans fourth. So I think the Titans are the 103. So this is basically a consolidation move of a bunch of picks to the Titans uh, to move up earlier in the fourth round. I mean, those fourth and fifth rounders, sometimes they hit, sometimes they are out of the league before training camp's done.
Yeah. Yep. Um, Titans will quickly realize that a lot of those players will just be burdens as 4-year deals. They may hit one like Trevon Diggs-esque cornerback that puts up 100+ points, and then the rest
Mhm.
of them may just be terrible. Or one may end up being James Robinson. We all look like an idiot.
I actually picked a couple of James Robinsons, not as many as I probably should have, but I have two or three across some of my leagues. So I'm happy to pound my chest for that one. But still, yeah, I mean, if you hit someone, then it's worth it, and especially if you're like you're saying, pounding corner. The problem is before you really get that payback for that corner, you either have to hit the Trayvon Diggs who gets all of the attention, or you have to wait 4 years until they actually give you that third round payback. So
Right.
um, it's tough. I found plenty of guys I like back in that fourth and fifth round, but it's tough to hit those. So uh, Titans had a lot of picks last year. We've got a new Titans owner. Luigi's been very good at identifying value there, so that's why he wants the extra shots at the the pie here. So yeah, again, I think it makes perfect sense for both sides.
Yep.
All right, another consolidation deal here. In this case, Buccaneers giving up Brandon Powell, Jalen Holmes, Quan Alexander, and Denzel Ward, and 2/4 for the Colts second. And the Colts were taking a team later on, so I think that's a top 40 pick. So I'm a little
Yeah.
surprised that there's that much value on this. The 2/4 and then Denzel Ward, if he continues to perform at this, will be a comp third next year. Quan Alexander is a 49er homer, a well described 49er homer. I think that's a questionable value on him. But again, Brandon Powell, I think, had a really good year, but he mostly due to injury. And then Jalen Holmes. So I prefer the Colts second on this, but I can't hate this for a team who's trying to build depth.
I mean, so like value-wise, incrementally, you get to about equivalent of the second round pick. But I can agree. Like I would probably want the second round pick because I can ultimately just draft a better, younger, healthier Quan Alexander, and then everything else is kind of just
That's the thing. Quan is $14 million on a 4 year deal at age 26. So it's not like he's about to be out of the league. Like he should have a couple more years of positive production. And especially if he bounces back in a situation like New Orleans, who's probably going to see a lot more defensive need in the upcoming couple of years. It could turn out very well for him, especially for a second. I think I'd rather have that top 40 pick, especially how, in terms of the players who end up falling to that range. But I can't hate it.
to any team that would want to put up points, I can completely agree with trading away that second round pick. Quan Alexander has the potential of going back to what he was his second to last year in Tampa Bay. Unfortunately, it's been quite a few years since then, and he's hasn't been healthy for any of them. So I don't think highly of him in that scenario. Brandon Powell's going to get targets in Atlanta. Jalen Holmes seemed to be a pretty decent defensive tackle. And Denzel Ward, I think, has massive upside as a cornerback. But with that said, it is a cornerback, and they aren't really valued in this league.
All right. I can't disagree with any of that. So on to the next one, which I think might be one of my favorite trades on this list.
Yeah.
The Chiefs giving up Mike Evans for the Panthers' first round pick this year, and that pick is the 15th pick. So Mike Evans has gotten a lot of hate this year. I really like Mike Evans in quite a few leagues, and I have him as my wide receiver 1 or 2 in most of those leagues. That said, he is also a $21 million a year player, so by no means cheap. The Chiefs have, if I remember correctly, Justin Jefferson, and another quality wide receiver who I can't remember off the top of my head outside of Evans. So it's not like they're dealing from a position of weakness here. They're dealing from a position of strength. And this pick should give them, like I said, with the previous conversation, the uh, the Packers pick should give them a pretty good shot at either a receiver, a top defensive player, or that third running back in the draft this year. So I like this deal. I think Evans is probably worth a little bit more if salaries weren't involved, but because it's a $20 million a year salary, it decreases that value that this kind of hits the nail on the head.
So I think very highly of Mike Evans. I think he is one of those closer to a generational type of wide receiver, one that's going to have production and longevity, and probably put up like Hall of Fame-esque numbers. And I think he's just right in the middle of his career. I don't think he's on the tail end by any means. This is one of the few trades that a lot of us, when we critique trades, we'll see it go down, and then we'll click on both of the teams and we'll look at roster construction, and we'll try to get the thought process just by assessing the knowable information. This is one of the few trades where I looked at it and I went, I would have given a first for Mike Evans, and then I looked at it again and I was like, I would have given up Mike Evans for a first. So, in that sense, I love it. I love this trade. I have no complaints. You both won. Great trade.
Yeah, and again, the Chiefs. The other guy I couldn't think of. You may have heard of this player, AJ Brown. So AJ Brown and Justin Jefferson as your receivers. Like I said, you have some flexibility. And as the Panthers, if they can get a quarterback, they've got Duke, Melvin, and Mixon at running back. Now they have Evans with Boyd and Robbie Anderson at receiver. This is starting to shape up to be a pretty competent offense if Darnold's able to avoid getting Wally pipped at the same time as them building a defense. So James is doing a good job building this team. And again, I don't hate the idea of Mike Evans for first, like you said. I think Mike Evans is worth a first. I think that contract, if I can sell it for a good first, is worth it. So like I said, I love this trade.
Yeah, there are a couple of players that are just either really high point scorers, like a Davante Adams that has the potential of being the number one wide receiver by a ridiculous amount.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also some of those players that are just I know I'm going to get probably 15 points plus every single game. And that's bare minimum. And I feel with the wide receiver position, there's 6 or 7 of them that if they ever do get close to scratching that $20 million price range or more, they're still worth it just because of their production and obvious longevity.
Right. And one of the things that Goose did to great success is he did a calculation based off of expected points per dollar. And he would stack his team up with the guys who had the highest expected points per dollar. And it meant he had very few, if any, studs. But God, was it tough to beat him because everyone was scoring 10 to 12 points on an average. And some of those were because they were putting up 30-point weeks. Some of those were because they were putting up 15-point weeks. But it's one of those where you look at it and say, hey, none of these players scare me. And then you look back later in the day and they put up 250 points. So that's one of the facts about this league that, it's important to understand. But it's one of those things in this league that depends on how you put your team together.
Also, I think Goose had I want to say especially last year. Not to say it was lucky, but a lot of his really good weeks were a product of luck by playing the numbers, in the same sense as I constructed a very similar team, but there were a lot of weeks where my team would all hit their average and not go much higher, where he had some where like 7 or 8 players would just bust out for like 10 points above their average. And then conveniently, the week that those particular players went back to their average points, somebody else would pop.
No, exactly. And it was a battle of attrition. As somebody who's in the same division as him. But anyways, moving on to the next one, we've got another big name moving, but definitely diminished brand value. I really like this deal for, now look at it. I really like this deal for both teams. Beckham moves to the Broncos for Von Miller and the Broncos second this year and the Broncos second next year. So that's going to be the 33rd pick this year. And unless Broncos is able to completely turn this around, probably an early second next year. So 2 early seconds with hopefully, again, legal trouble outstanding on Von Miller, good linebacker, for a depressed value wide receiver. So I prefer the Broncos side of this, but I don't hate this for the Giants.
So, excuse my ignorance, but what kind of legal trouble is Von Miller in?
So let me look. I know that he was doing some stuff with the Denver Sheriff.
Okay. I don't hate this trade. I hate all of the players involved in the trade, but that's just from a personal standpoint. Value-wise, perfectly fine. Von Miller's 31, so he's still got a couple of years. That is another position where you can get a couple extra years. I mean, we've seen Thomas Davis play until his late 30s. So certainly possible for him to do the same. Odell, I mean, when he's out there, he gets a ridiculous amount of targets. If he's healthy, he's going to be productive. I like those 2 second-round picks.
Yeah, it's one of those things where if you had made a deal for Odell last year, it would have been 2 first-round picks minimum.
Right.
So getting it done for, albeit likely early second-round picks this year, is a win, especially considering it was due to injury. That said, I think a lot of people are trying to lose patience in Odell, and he may not be a Brown next year. So does a third team figure out how to make him work? Who knows? But again, I think this is another one where I think the value works out. Those are early enough seconds that you could call them firsts, and especially considering the way that we handle renegotiations in this league, where he has now the first shot at a first-round player who slips out of the first round that he can renegotiate if things don't go immediately great for that player. It's a huge step up and a huge advantage to be able to do something like that. And if Miller is able to pull things back together, again, legal trouble, I don't know what it is because literally everything is Von Miller might be in some legal trouble. We don't know if he's going to get charged with a crime or not. So I don't know what the actual crime was. But there was thought that he might be charged with something. So that said, if Miller is in the clear, then he's probably got another year or 2 of production. The Giants want to bounce immediately back, considering they have Lamar and some other strong pieces for next year. All right. Moving on to the next one. We have Jadeveon Clowney and Tremaine Edmonds going for Romeo Okwara.
This one's gonna be this is.
I don't like this one.
Nope.
I really don't. Like, look.
It's a whole Jadeveon Clowney too much.
So here's my view on this. And I have a feeling you're in the same camp. If if not wildly close. Clowney, let's put him to the side, what he was this year. Tremaine Edmonds and that defense, like, I want as much as I can get of that.
Tremaine Edmonds is the most terrifying human being to look across the field at.
He's 22 years old. He is like, if you're looking to buy a linebacker, like, he's the guy you want to get. So what do I need to give up to get Tremaine Edmonds? Romeo Okwara is 25 years old. Again, undrafted free agent coming out of school. I'm going to throw my hand up and say, I don't know the most about defense, especially about undrafted free agents. So I could be wildly wrong on this.
So Romeo was, I don't want to say a stud, but somebody that you saw would translate more to the NFL game than the college game. But he didn't necessarily have the most glowing reviews from his coaches. So he was expected to be a late round or sign on to a team, but he was viewed as somebody that, say they would have went into a supplemental draft, somebody would have given up a pick for him or something of that nature. He wasn't the typical undrafted slouch.
Right. So let me get this right. Okwara does not have a team for 2021.
No.
His 2021 voids. So he's a free agent. For a free agent D-end who could end up getting converted to a linebacker if he's in a different system, gets moved for one of the top young linebackers in the game and a very good pass rusher. Like, look, I get it. Atlanta's really trying to add that D-end, but this ain't it.
Yeah. That overall value would have, like, if we're talking about defensive ends, it would have commanded one of the two Sweats or somebody that's like ridiculously cheap value, like price controlled and top 10 in their position. Maybe a Brian Burns, but definitely not Romeo.
If this was Montez Sweat, I have a completely different reaction to it. But this is Romeo Okwara. I mean,
actually, if it was Romeo's little brother, I probably wouldn't have scoffed as much.
Fair.
And he barely even got playing time.
Yeah, but again, it's one of those where, like, especially when you hit free agency and you've got the UDFA, I mean, look, he could hit and he could make us all look very foolish next year, but I'd much rather have Clowney and Edmonds here. I think Andy cleaned up on this.
Yep. It's certainly possible that Edmonds stagnates as a top 15 linebacker rather than a top 10 or top 5.
But it's still a top 15 linebacker in a 32-team league.
True, but I mean, linebackers are becoming more plentiful in this league. Not necessarily, like, don't get me wrong, top 15 linebackers aren't becoming more plentiful, but more linebacker production is becoming a thing, and you can almost negate that. Now that still, it ultimately results in, like, Romeo's not the defensive end that I like, productive defensive end that I want for that type of value.
Right. All right. I think we've beaten that horse pretty thoroughly. So let's move on to the next one here. Which the next two actually involve us on both of them. So, which do you want to explain the DK deal, or would you rather kind of explain the Baker deal?
Well, so the DK deal, just like, if somebody had the same reaction that I had to the Edmonds deal, I wouldn't be upset. But I think when you look into it, it's not as awful as somebody would think.
No, and again, as the owner of these two players, I was very excited to have them on my team. But when I was trying to make the move, I was trying to accomplish a couple of things. One, I had a dearth of DNs stuck on my taxi squad, and I was trying to do something that made sense to actually free up some years to get them off. So if I could consolidate, I was going to. So God, I love Laviska Chenault. I was debating between Laviska and Patrick Queen last year with that pick for a good period of time. And Josh Allen, I truly believe he is going to have a 10 to 14 sack season one of these years. And considering Kerry Hyder put up 8 and was the DE 15, that's immediately going to put Allen as a top 10 DE that year. So I think you've got two really good prospects in your first back. I love having DK, but it hurt giving up those players.
Yeah, understandable. The young, very productive defensive ends are probably the most valuable assets in this league right now. They don't command the highest return, but they are one of those things that if you have one or two, you can do a lot of things, especially move them for some very valuable picks. So I have two that at a certain point, if I need to move them, I can. If I want to hold on to them during a tanking season, they're not going to ultimately impact my points per game too much. I mean, sure, they both could put up 40 points in one game, but it's not going to happen every week. I love Chenault. I believe you got the pick that ultimately became Chenault from me. So if it wasn't you, it would have been me picking it. Yeah, I don't know why I have some weird attraction to the young players in Jacksonville, but I think very highly of them.
And look, I am also beyond being a 49er fan. My crazy collection of team allegiances also has Ohio State. So I think Urban Meyer is going to be a good coach there. I don't think he's going to be the savior that everyone may be making him out to be, but I think everyone's going to play a little bit better. I think someone like Laviska, who is a mismatch in the slot, has a great opportunity with Trevor to break out. So again, I think both of those players are going to rise in value. I think first, depending on how you kind of set up your team, is going to be very strong first next year. So next year when we look at this, we may say, "Wow, DK was a steal for these players."
Yep.
But that's when you have to package up to get a stud.
It very well might, depending on where the pick falls, it very well might end up being a very good trade for you. But I'm okay with making that gamble so that I have the ability to dictate where I want that pick to be.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. And then our other deal was two of my rookie linebackers, Shaq Quarterman and Jacob Phillips, both who got pretty well drafted by those teams to be part of the linebacker conversation this year. Again, late enough that they weren't going to challenge for a spot last year, but again, probably be in the mix this year, as well as my first round pick next year for Jerome Baker. And again, same idea. Free up some years. I needed more reliable linebacker for this year. I think he's got a pretty good handle on that job for the next couple of years, even though there was a jump in price. But still, it wasn't so much the contract value as rather the years that I was focused on here.
Right. So basically, you paid. I don't want to say a premium because it's not really a premium on Baker's value, but you paid to essentially acquire another extension because I had recently just extended him.
Yeah.
And being able to do that with a young linebacker is a great asset. And like I've touched on before, linebacker is one of the positions where you can see a lot of years. So a lot of years from a really productive linebacker, yeah, it's worth giving up a first.
And that's the thing. It allows me to keep Simmons as my linebacker 3.
Right.
And again, I have Martinez as my 1, Baker is my 2, and now Simmons is my 3 as he kind of comes into the fold, kind of build from there. So that was my thought process there.
Simmons could end up being your safety 1 next year.
He could. Again, God knows how they're going to line up that defense. But
it would be really nice to have like him as a safety and put up a very Logan Ryan-esque year a la last year. putting up almost 260 plus points, just
He'd be a
playing
perfect fit.
everywhere.
Now I'm getting a third for Hilton, and I think their fourth or fifth for Mills. I think it'd be a great backfill to have him be able to play in that secondary. Again, we'll see what ends up happening. I don't like using a first round pick on a secondary player, but that said, I think his athletic gifts let him line up wherever he wants to line up. But
right.
still, all right, and you weren't done after our two trades. You were in rare form last night.
Yeah, I'm still in that form. If anybody wants to send me offers right now, I take all of my players.
So I'm really interested in this. I know you were talking through some of this with some of our other owners earlier today, but it was Jacoby Brissett, Kenyon Drake, Damian Byrd, and Amari Cooper for Daniel Jones, a third, a fourth, and a fifth. So I guess my first question is, do you believe in Daniel Jones?
Not necessarily. I believe in the scarcity of the position in this league. And I don't believe Jacoby Brissett's going to be a Teddy Bridgewater-esque player where he gets a contract and gets a year to be a starter. So Brissett, even though I love that contract and I love having a backup like him, like I can give him up. Drake is an aging running back. Last year, if you would have saw this trade, it would have been ridiculously lopsided because Drake was so much more valuable.
Right.
Bird's somewhat valuable, but he's old. Like he's 27 years old. Amari Cooper, I love him. I think he's priced right. I think he's a great player. But after the previous two trades that I made, if I'm going to go all in with this tank for at least a year, Amari Cooper is going to be older and older by the time my window opens up. So there's no necessity for me to hold him. You could argue that maybe I sold him a little bit low, but that's no problem. So Daniel Jones on his own, I'd imagine is probably worth at least a first round pick.
Right. I think that's the key piece here is for this trade package, I agree. And it was bad luck on all of these players, and Cooper, I think, is definitely worth a first. Drake, I think, is probably a second in value just based off the risk associated with starter next year, and the others are day 3 picks. So getting a starting quarterback on a first round pick contract is solid, plus a couple of other picks. I think makes sense. Again, it's one of those of is Daniel Jones going to be worth that first? That becomes the question. And I think it's a matter of where you move him to. I think there's a lot of quarterbacks moving all around the league this year, not just ours, but in the real life league. And I mean, if you're able to convert that to a top 15 pick, I think that's great. Or if you're able to convert that into multiple 22 picks, I think that's great. Yep. If you're not, then it wasn't worth the risk that you gave up here. But I think it's one of those where it's almost easier to get that younger asset where after a blow-up week, you're able to move them for the price you want rather than trying to hope that everyone overlooks CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup and says, oh, yeah, Amari Cooper is pretty darn good too.
Right. Which, and I do feel like that's somewhat of the reason why his perceived value has diminished is because though he is productive and there has been no major drop off in his production, the last few games with Dak and CeeDee, Amari was an afterthought.
Yeah.
So, and I think just CeeDee's ascendance into relevancy has kind of like put Amari's just star power in a generalized sense on the back burner, and his value is, I don't want to say it's crumbled, but his value is less than what he brings to a team in the hunt for a playoff berth or a championship.
I agree. And if I had not traded him directly to you, I would have been hot on the trail of Amari Cooper. But because I could not.
Yep. And so Daniel Jones, I don't think is like is bad. He's as bad off as like a lot of people think. He's young. He's shown flashes of being a decent quarterback, especially in this league.
Mhm.
I feel like a team that wants to contend this year, maybe like New Orleans or Panthers, or somebody that do, if Seahawks decides they want to start contending, uh, just a team that has no real quarterback or like no real productive quarterback, they may they may inquire. Um, a team later on in the year may inquire about a package of Cam Newton and Daniel Jones if Cam Newton gets a starting job. So I know I can use him as an asset to get draft picks, younger players, something of that nature. I'm not necessarily over the moon with him. And then also, if nobody has interest in it, he could potentially be the starter, not this coming year, but the year after when I may want to make a run or potentially make a run. And he could be a decent quarterback or potentially even a solid secondary option for our league.
No, and again, it's one of those that you mentioned a couple of teams. And I'm looking at rosters right now. Like again, Dominic is a new owner, and I won't speak for him, but if he wanted to send his pick for this year for, say, Daniel Jones and a number of players in your defense, he could be setting himself up for a very strong year this year,
Right.
um, while also not giving up a ton of things because that fourth pick, again, I think it's the fourth pick. Yeah, fourth pick. If things break incorrectly, and I don't think they will, he could be waiting for hoping Trey Lance ends up being his quarterback in the future versus having either Wilson or Fields. So that being said, like it's not a bad thing to be able to have Jones with that pick plus a defense, considering you have CEH, you have Edmonds, you have Colin Johnson, Brown, a number of other players on this team that are ready to contribute. Like that's not a bad team, especially in the West.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, don't get me wrong. That would probably be the ideal situation for me. I don't know if he would probably jump in because that is such a what you would say a valuable pick. Um, but
right.
yeah, I could see if he ended up acquiring another first in some way, shape, or form, like the one
Like it
that
would
he
have to
just
be
got.
something that it would have to be something like Jones, Mostert, um, Trevathan, and a couple of other defensive players for that pick. I feel like,
Yeah,
but
it
again, I
would.
feel like that's something you wouldn't be unwilling to give up, and something that if he wanted to actually try and make some noise this year, like again, he's got a couple of near misses, like
Yeah,
Gandy Golden, Coulter, Malone, guys like that who, frankly, make a lot of sense on a rebuilding team, like John Ross, for example. If he goes into, say, Houston to replace Will Fuller, that could be making a lot of sense. But again, I
yep.
digress.
Long story short, Daniel Jones plus another couple of my assets could be a very splashy acquisition for somebody and is something that could be on the table. So I do agree with that.
All right, I'll have to keep that in mind because I do love trading. Um, all right, let's see. Moving on to the next one here, we have the Panthers making another deal here, trading Duke Johnson and Terrell Burgess for the Chargers second. So a late second for Duke Johnson and Terrell Burgess. Um, look, I mean, I feel like this is a fair risk. If things break in Houston where David Johnson is not the guy and they don't draft a replacement running back, which I could see based off of all of their other needs, them do. Great, Duke is that player. That said, I feel like everyone's waiting on Duke to be that player for the last 5 or 6 years. Like at some point, we just got to stop waiting.
This is the quintessential gamble pick that I would tell any new owner not to do. But if they
Yeah.
want to do it, go for it. Like Terrell Burgess is, weirdly enough, he's kind of another Isaiah Simmons-esque player where like he could just find himself being a linebacker and a very productive one at that. So like that's not off the table for him. Duke Johnson is in a very infrequent, weird position where he's not like a starting caliber running back in the league, but like Texans could just go into the season knowing they're going to be terrible and just leave him as the starter.
Yeah. Again, that's one of those things. Like I would probably prefer the second, but considering the player I would get with that second, I don't know if that's better than Duke Johnson or Terrell Burgess. So I like this deal. Again, with Panthers going out there saying, "Hey, give me picks," and continuing to buy players who are going to help them compete, but Panthers are definitely building something here.
Yeah. Yeah, I have no problem with what they're doing, especially as like a new player, like a new owner in the league. I I have no issues with them taking like the next 2 years because they have a good team already. Taking the next 2 years worth of picks and kind of leveraging them into being a better team. Like that's to make a deep playoff run in your first year or second year is like a great thing. Like if great boost of confidence. And then after that, if you want to tear it down, go for it.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, so many players like to tear it down at this point. Like, get paid,
Yeah.
get in the money. Like, that's not a bad thing.
It
I
took
joined a
me
couple of leagues last year, and I didn't do a thing to tear it down, and I ended up in the money in a lot of those leagues. It's like sometimes just getting paid is a great way to start.
I took over my roster 3 years ago at a team that was like 3-7. I decided that I could like tank because I had my pick, or I could just make some moves with the intention of doing things like for the next year. I ended up finishing like 500, like a game out of the playoffs, and then like went on a I don't want to say a decent run, but at least made the playoffs the past 2 years. And like I had the assets to blow it up when I first came in. Like I had Henry, I had Saquon. At some point during the first week, I had like Tannehill. Like I had some really valuable assets, and I could have just like blown it up for 2 or 3 draft picks, like not draft picks, but like full drafts from teams.
Yeah.
And I didn't. I at least gave it a shot. See what I could do. Ultimately, my efforts were resulted in nothing. But yeah, don't blow it up when you first take it over. So
No,
yeah,
exactly. And that's the thing. Like, you could have done that, but I think this turned out it turned out better than you're making it out to be because it was some bad luck that you didn't make it one round further and ended up with the money in this league last year. So
I'm not upset about my like how I finished. I've established myself as a quality owner in this league. Like
Mhm.
I'm active. I know what the hell I'm doing. So like yeah, I'm not. Oh, I didn't win money for 2 years. Oh well, eventually it'll happen.
But what we're saying is make sure you spam him with terrible trades.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
any as possible.
Regardless of how competent of an owner I am, I'm still liable to accept some really awful trades.
Yeah, and look, that actually brings me to another point here before we get into the last deal, before we close things down. Like, look, new owners, don't be shy about making trades or trade offers. Um, some people are going to be a little bit more direct in their feedback to you than others, but you're going to find out pretty quick about how teams value different assets. If you're looking for a top 10 pick for a couple of players who probably aren't top 10 at the position, you're probably going to get shot down and might even get called out in chat. Like, it is what it is. Like, don't get upset. Don't get gun shy. Don't um, stop sending offers because of that. Um, that said, if there are a couple of things that you're not sure, like, hey, this value seems a little bit off, or I feel like I'm over offering for some of these things, don't hesitate to ask some of the other owners in the league who are involved in things. Um, as you may have guessed, because the fact that I do this podcast, I enjoy sharing my opinion on a lot of things with people. I'm pretty sure RJ does as well. Matt's not shy. Chris isn't shy. Jeremy's not shy. There's a number of teams here that if they're not involved in the trade and you got to run it by them, they're going to give you what they think. So don't be afraid to do that. And again, don't also be afraid of feedback. If we tell you like going for George Kittle with a late first probably isn't going to happen, especially when Kittle's locked in on a 2-year deal. Like, learn from that. Like, it is what it is, and that's the way that the league is set up. So, again, the goal here is to have 32 owners who make this league a lot of fun and very challenging. But it's tough to get there because this is not the easiest league to digest.
Yeah, that's very true. At the very worst, like a trade offer can start a conversation that could ultimately get a deal done, or you could end up talking to one of us and we could point you in the direction of a whole nother trade with a different team that could result in great things. So, keep sending the offers, even if they're bad.
Yeah, I mean that's my view as well. Is I'd rather have offers than not. I think it's always fun to see that email of an offer coming through and be able to communicate on that. That said, let's keep it constructive. If there's go ahead.
The one thing that I could suggest is like utilizing the actual trade bait inside the league itself. Like it, as long as everybody stays active in that, like I know other people check that. And like the second I update it, people start inquiring about things. So like that is a great way to just start a conversation. If you wake up one day and you feel a little bit less confident in a player, throw them on your trade bait, see what you can get, see if anybody starts asking questions about them. I do it all the time.
No, absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense. And for the folks in this league, you might get a couple who come in and try and completely undercut you on them. But for the most part, you're going to come and be able to negotiate something pretty solid for that player. Or if you can't, that's a wake up call that maybe that player isn't worth what you thought. But at the end of the day, let's keep it constructive and keep it learning. All right, let me see. I think that takes care of our trades. The last one is Josh Reynolds, who I think is a free agent for Deshaun Elliott, who I also think is a free agent. I could be wrong, but
he might have one more year with Baltimore, but I don't think it's that much longer.
No, this is just a sheer hope that Reynolds latches on someplace and is able to break out at his second spot instead of his first spot. But yeah, I think that does it. And I don't think there have been any new deals in the time that we've been talking. So I think that gets us to the trade. So in summary, like, look, we talked about a couple of different themes here. Rebuilding, building, rounding out your team, a whole number of things. There's never a one size fits all for trades. So, as RJ and I will tell you, the DK Metcalf deal was one of those where he and I have been talking about this for a couple of weeks and just were blatantly honest about what we wanted to get out of the deal. And we ended up getting it from both sides. So I would say be honest, be direct, and don't get offended because, different people are coming from different perspectives on these things. And none of them are wrong.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, specifically that trade, it did take a while. It took me. I knew I wanted to trade. You sent me an offer. Took me a while to consider it. took more of a counter of me just saying these are the players that I'm more interested in, that are similar to the players that were offered, and we were able to hash it out. And it was a mix of players that were initially offered and players that I inquired about, and it turned out great for everybody. So it's really about just starting that conversation. Because
and again, and don't think that anyone's going to be like, "Hey, I don't want to bother this person" or things like that. I think I've made that point pretty clear. But the key thing is just have that conversation. Like, say this is what I want, this is what I don't want, and be open to a response. And you're going to find yourselves making more deals than not. And we're playing fantasy football. A lot of the fun in this is making those deals. So that said, any closing thoughts, RJ?
Nope. I think this was a great podcast, and we accomplished a lot.
I agree, and hopefully this is informative, and hopefully nobody crucifies me next year when Chenault and Josh Allen in the top 10 of the position, and DK Metcalf goes back with a knee injury in week 2. So hopefully that doesn't happen. But that said, there's always a risk. But RJ, thanks for joining in, and hope everyone has a great night.